Thank you, Lenny. Hey, if we could have you hold on, maybe we'd like to spur a little bit of a conversation here, and maybe I could have you have a seat up front. I'd also like to call up a couple of my friends to have a conversation, particularly about what all this means to Oregon. John Carter, Sabrina Parsons, please join us if you would. As they come up, let me tell you a bit about them. For those of you who don't know John Carter, I'm sorry, he is one of the smartest minds we have in Oregon, which explains why Governor-elect Kitzhaber has tapped him to develop strategies to strengthen Oregon's manufacturing sector. John is chairman of Schnitzer Steel and prior served in a variety of senior management positions for Bechtel Group. Sabrina Parsons is a new friend that we met on the road this year as we traveled the state, collecting input for the plan. Sabrina is the CEO of Palo Alto Software, where she has grown the company from 25 to 45 employees. In her hometown of Eugene, Sabrina has been co-chair of the 2010 Willamette Angels Conference, which connects young businesses with angel and venture investors. She's a member of the board of the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce and the Chamber's Entrepreneurial Advisory Board. So thank you for joining us. So I'd like to maybe start out, John, you have been tapped by the governor to put together a strategy to help retain and deliver new jobs into the manufacturing sector. Maybe you can share a little bit of your reflection on what Lenny had to say as it affects Oregon.
Well, I think it was a great presentation, and I think it hit on many of the things that are affecting us as a manufacturing sector in the state, but the state more broadly. And I guess being a basic optimist, I'd say there are some things that we can address that will actually help that. The first and foremost is productivity improvements, which is quite a challenge from your presentation, is something the manufacturing sector has been doing for some time. They've been doing it because they had to. One of the things that is always interesting in our business is the discussion about companies outsourcing jobs. That outsourcing actually is in two modes. First, it's one of the reasons why multinationals have not created the most jobs over the last decade. It's because they really do create them, but they create them through outsourcing. And the reason small businesses are so successful is that they're usually clustered around large companies that outsource services and goods procurement. That's happened both domestically and internationally. And the reason that that's happened internationally is because consumers vote with their dollars. When consumers buy foreign goods, they export jobs. It's not companies. Now, part of our challenge is through productivity is to get the price of American jobs and the price of American goods competitive. To do that, the only way is productivity, because we can't compete with low-cost labor in developing countries. But I'm actually quite optimistic about that. In our business, we do a lot of things today we didn't do 5 years ago. And partly it's because we've made significant investments, not just in growth, but in technology, which is kind of an odd concept in a recycling business that's been around for more than 100 years, but that's what it is. We believe in the concept of sustainability, but to be sustainable, it also has to be economic, and that's what we do. The second thing is jobs creation. I'm very optimistic about the traded sector in the state of Oregon. And I think the reason that you'll see jobs creation there is because I think we've reached a point in the public dialogue where we understand that we have to change public policy. And public policy has to be directed toward positive ends in the manufacturing sector and the business sector in general. When we look at the last decade, I'm reminded of Einstein's definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. We do have to change what we're doing. And part of those changes really, I won't address all your anchors, but there are two I'd like to. One is the anchor you talk about government service delivery. And I think the point you made is a critical point, which is that Government needs to deliver service more efficiently by understanding what the private sector went through over the last 2 decades. One of the reasons we raised productivity is we had to. Government's now in that stage. They have to. And that means consolidation, that means lowering overhead, reducing costs. It means working on the cost side of the equation. And the other is in the energy sector. Energy efficiency is one of those things that for manufacturing, we have to have. We have to have reliable, affordable energy. And that doesn't mean energy that only works when the wind blows. We have to be able to look at our progress on alternative forms of energy, because clearly that's the way that people want to go. But we have to choose those alternative energy sources, whether it's solar or biomass or a different form of wind energy. We have to choose those sources that are reliable and affordable, which means we've got to get out of the business of supporting uneconomic energy production. So that's my reaction.
Well, gee, John, I don't know anything about that last part, but...
I thought I might get your attention.
Thank you for your comments. Sabrina, you have had the opportunity to live all across the world. You've run high-tech companies. I just want to say on the record, thank you for bringing your skills home in order to help innovators and educators in your community in the Eugene area. Maybe a few thoughts from your perspective, if you would.
Sure, thanks, Pat, and I really appreciate Lenny's perspective, and I think one of the things that I'm most interested in is how we can get the business community behind education, and not just higher education, but K through 12 education. I think when you see the PISA study, which was 500 15-year-olds in 65 different developed nations, and we're scoring 34th in math, and 23rd in science, and 17th in reading, and yet we're trying to compete in the global economy. I think, obviously, very clearly we have a problem. And I think Pat mentioned, this idea in Oregon and nationwide where we can't just keep asking for more funding and yet cutting and delivering less. All of us in business know that you'd be out of business if that's what you did. You can't say it's going to cost you more, but we're not going to give you as much. So I think we've got to innovate in education, and I think a lot of the times in business and in meetings about economic development, I hear a lot about the higher education problem and that we really have to fund higher education. And I think sometimes K-12 gets lost, and right now we're in a crisis in Oregon. From a business perspective, I'll just tell you a little story. In Eugene, there's a big crisis in our school district, as I'm sure there is across all of Oregon. And my husband and I went to a big public forum about what it's going to look like in our school district in the next 10 years. And I am not just the CEO of Palo Alto Software, but I'm the mother of 3 small children, ages 6, 4, and 1. So public education is very important to me. It's going to serve my children.
Hey, by the way, I want to talk about dedication. She brought her 1-year-old on his birthday here yesterday to be with us, so thank you.
Definitely. Well, like I said, it's very important, and it's very near and dear to my heart. Right now, I've got my oldest son is in 1st grade in Eugene, and as we went to these meetings on the crisis that we're facing in Eugene, one of the principals of one of the high schools got up and painted a very bleak picture of what high school will look like if we don't change. And I think we've got to change through innovation in the education system. I think we have to look at how are we organized, what can we change, how can we optimize, and really just looking at different ways to do things. We can't just keep doing the same thing and not achieving and then wondering what's wrong and then just asking for more money. But the picture that's painted in the Eugene district for high school is one where motivated, smart students are going to graduate in 3 years because we can't afford to educate them, where they're going to get kicked out of high school as soon as they reach what we call, requirements, and that's it. And how are our students going to compete in higher education with students around the world and in other states if they're getting 3 years of education, they're getting no AP classes, our international high school programs are in jeopardy. We just can't compete. And my husband and I went home that night and talked about, wow, can we keep our business in Oregon if this is what it looks like for public education? we love Oregon, we love the livability, we love the natural resources, we love the life that we can lead as a family and as business leaders, but we can't keep our business here if we can't educate our children, because ultimately, I have to be a parent and a mother first, and if my kids are going to go into a high school system that doesn't have any resources and doesn't allow them to compete in the global economy, I have to think about, okay, where am I going to go to give them that? And I believe that we can do it, and I believe that in the public system, businesses have to understand, whether you have children or not, the impact it has on businesses. When we talk about the quality of life in Oregon, and I think Ron Wyden mentioned, that's one of the reasons why people come to Oregon, why businesses move here. And when we talk about economic development and the fact that we want companies to start and grow and stay in Oregon, you've got to talk about K-12 education, because when entrepreneurs look where they're going to locate their businesses, they look at things like public education. What are the test scores? Can I go there, and can I get all of my other employees to come there, and can I offer them things like good public education? So I think we're at a critical turning point, and I think it's something that the business community has to get everybody else to understand, that it's intertwined together and it's vital to economic development.
Great, thank you so much. So Lenny, you've heard a little bit of an Oregon spin on some of the themes that you brought forward in your talk. And any reaction?
Well, I want to leave you with more of an optimistic note about the potential here. These are obviously huge challenges in a very trying time. But if you look around the world at when you've seen major growth and productivity, or when you've seen major innovation, it's when you've had a shock, often technological, competitive, or regulatory, that then forces people to innovate and do things differently, that then spreads across those that are doing it well and succeeding. And if we didn't have a shock in the last little while here, I don't know what is one. So colloquially, necessity is the motherhood of invention, and it is time to innovate. And the fact that you can have this scale of leadership in this state come together and say, now is the time that we're not going to do business as usual, we're actually going to address these core issues and ensure that we are competitive going forward, I think is encouraging. It's hard work, but it's going to take the kind of leadership that's in this room to make it happen.
Great, thank you so much. I'd like you all to thank our panelists, John, Sabrina, Lenny. Can't thank you enough.